You're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And you don't need a new website. You don't need a new logo. You don't need to make it look pretty. That's the equivalent of like buying a fancy car for business. Right. But if you're just starting out, you just need people to pay you.
People would be shocked how many businesses just don't work.
Now with the age of information and everything that's out there, like things that I probably would have had a 4-year degree with, I can just ask AI and I know in a minute.
So I think experts are going to become more experts. And the people who are kind of living in that kind of mediocre, kind of just do stuff for a job, that group's going to have a rough time in the next 10 years.
I've learned to use debt in a positive way, because if you're building and investing and growing in yourself, as long as you have a plan to get out of it, then you're doing the right thing.
You have to really think about how do you connect people in the environment. So the question is if you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be? Welcome to today's PlanAssist Podcast. I'm Tim Clifford. I'm a certified financial planner, and I have a small practice in Winter Garden, Florida. And we do this weekly podcast with small business owners. And before I get in and introduce our today's guest, just real briefly, what PlanAssist is it's not a product, it's not an investment, it's a process to help you make better financial decisions. And we always start with kind of 3 questions we're trying to help you answer yes to. The first question is your lifestyle aligned with your income? Is your income diversified and resilient? And then the third question is, are you making progress on both? And one of the things we try to use this podcast for is to help answer those questions. So we won't always revisit them because this isn't a financial podcast, but just to kind of set it up today, I'm super excited to welcome Melody Morrison. She's the founder of Allegro Events. And what she does is she's a conductor of energy. Melody brings nearly 2 decades of experience of hospitality and event strategy, and she focuses on something most people forget. And that's not just how the event looks, but how does it feel? And she's built her whole business around that idea of events are a living environment where energy, presence, human connection ultimately define the experience. So with that, she lives in Winter Springs. Her office is downtown Orlando. So with that, did I miss anything or you want to add something?
No, I think that's great. So just to, recap and top it off, the Allegro Events, we really focus on the human aspect of events, especially in the corporate world. We see a lot of people who they're focused on scanning badges and how many butts can fit in seats. And that's just the reality of the efficiency of the world. It's shifting. We're getting out of that mode and we're getting more in the connection, which is really great that we're doing this podcast, because that in and of itself is the human aspect of the financial service industry. So that's really, really neat.
The human part, everyone keeps saying that it's going to go away. I'm like, I think it's going to become more important.
Yes.
I think it's like, I actually think if people are going to have to be more on their game. So I think experts are going to become more experts. And the people who are kind of living in that kind of mediocre, kind of just do stuff for a job, that group's going to have a rough time in the next 10 years. But the group who's really, really kind of top in their fields, I think it looks really bright for me personally. I mean, at least from my perspective.
100%. No, I completely agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm excited to get into the call, but before I do, I always start with the same question. So the question is if you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be? And it doesn't have to be financial advice. So what advice would you give yourself if you could go back and give your younger self advice?
Interesting, because I definitely did prepare on the financial side, but on a personal note, I think trusting myself more.
Okay, good.
That would be the big thing. When I spent a lot of time thinking about what I was going to say, like as far as like financial advice to myself, and that would be to invest in myself more.
Uh-huh.
Like, I feel like as I've grown, I was definitely an experienced type of person. Like I went right into hospitality. I decided to not take, a lot of people my age went to college. I had the scholarship. I could have gone to college, but I weighed my options. And coming from a family that was incredibly in debt, I learned very early that, okay, that's not what I want to start my life with. So it was either $40,000 in student loans or go straight into hospitality as a manager, making what I was going to make after my degree out the gate. Like,
Right.
no brainer. I'm going to be going to management. And it really has served me well because I learned a lot of just life skills that I feel like you can't teach in school, you know? And now with the age of information and everything that's out there, like things that I probably would have had a 4-year degree with, I can just ask AI and I know in a minute.
Yeah, no,
Like,
that's right. No,
yeah.
actually, that's a very kind of common decision people come to today, I think, or at least more and more common is don't go to college. That was a little unusual for when you did it though. So you were
Hmm.
kind of a little bit kind of early adopter of that because today I do meet a lot of kids that just don't go to college. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, unless they're going for, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, you know what I mean? If they're going to be
Exactly.
specialty, then you obviously have to, an engineer, obviously.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
it's just like you said, it was just something that it was kind of expected, you know,
right.
and I can't remember how many times like I've had conversations with people because my original idea was I'll take a year off, which was just a cover for I'm not going back. And I
Yeah,
knew I
exactly.
know that now, but everybody was telling me that if you take a year off, you're not going back. And sure enough, I'm not. I had an opportunity with a company I worked for. I worked for Darden Restaurants actually, and they have a great program where they actually pay for your schooling. And I did think at one point, well, maybe I will go back and maybe I will because they're going to invest in me. But I didn't want to be the one to pay it.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. That's a good go back. That's why I always start the conversation with kind of what would you give your younger self because I get different answers. It's interesting every time I get a little bit different answers, but the I'd trust myself more comes up a lot in different variations. So it
Yeah.
comes up in I trust myself more, I'd take more risk. I'd go do stuff that I actually think could have worked. You know what I mean? I mean, so it does, you know, that answer comes up more often than some even the
Yeah.
financial questions. The two big ones obviously are that or some variation of that answer, and I'd stay out of debt. The debt part is something that's just destroyed so many kids and
Hmm.
families. It's just devastating, and they don't realize it until kind of it's too late. You know what I mean? I mean, because then all of a sudden you're like you can't do that opportunity because you have debt.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I saw what debt did to my family. So I had the opposite strategy. I always used to joke, and I have a number of credit cards. Like when I say a number, probably over my lifetime, over 40. Um, because I play the game. Like I
Right.
learned the game because I watched my parents flip cards and try to do the 0% interest and all of this jazz. They finally paid off one card recently. They're in their 60s and 70s now. And they had a card where they put $800 for a dog back in 1988. And they paid off that dog about 5 years ago, which
How
is
much that dog costs
absolutely,
them?
oh my gosh, over the lifetime, think about it. That's
Probably
40, what
five,
is that,
six
40
grand.
years? At least. And so I learned that that was not something you did. Like if you don't have the money for it, don't put it on the card. And I've used cards and I've used debt, especially now. I'm my business is bootstrapped. I don't have any other alternate investments that are helping me with this. So
Uh-huh.
I've learned to use debt in a positive way because if you're building and investing and growing in yourself, as long as you have a plan to get out of it, then you're doing the right thing. Like
Yeah.
using other people's money to then turn it into more money. But I was very debt adverse because of what I grew up with. Like I never wanted to use debt.
It,
And
as long as you're completely self-aware and honest with yourself, because that becomes the big challenge is I'm going to use this to grow. But the business, that's kind of my passion. That's why I actually do this podcast. And one of the reasons I just enjoy so much going to 1 million cups, because you just kind of hear all these ideas and all these stories and stuff. But one of the things that over the years that I've just noticed is the business has to work. I mean, kind of first and foremost, right? And sometimes
1000%.
that sounds ridiculously simple and silly, but people would be shocked how many businesses just don't work. It kind of goes to my when I sit down with a client and do a financial plan, I call it a here there plan. You can call it whatever, but I mean, it's a real strategy. I mean, it's a business strategy that exists. But what it does is it kind of takes all the noise out and talks about here's where you are and where do you want to go. And then you get hyper focused on what are the two or three things you need to do in the next in 2026, right? I mean, so they'll say, well, I want to go do this and this and this. That's all really, really interesting and important someday, but we need to do these three things. And then I really, as I do meetings with clients, I'll say, okay, well, what are we going to do in the next 6 months? But if I do that for 10 years, like I tell them, all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I knocked out 20, 30 things, really
Yeah.
big things, you know?
Yeah.
But it goes back, that kind of answers that, you know, as we build our practices, we got to make sure that we have kind of people in our lives that are saying, okay, that's working or that's not, you know?
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned that. I call it shiny object syndrome,
Yeah.
especially people who are entrepreneurial minded. Like this is actually my technical sixth business that
Uh-huh.
I've had over the years. And every one I've learned a little bit more. But I think with this one, the most, this is the first time where I've had actual employees for me. And throughout my years in management and growing teams, I've learned that you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And I made it a point that, like, my operations manager, he will tell me straight up, we can't do that. I have this like syndrome where I dream and I believe and I have these big ideas and I talk to a client because I'm in sales and I talk to a client and I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that for you. And then I bring it to her and she's like, no, it's
Can't
not
do it.
possible.
That's wonderful.
So
I mean,
um,
that's the key to life, I think, is having someone like that in our lives.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. And it works the same way, like on the financial aspect of it. Like, and I'm sure you see this time and time and time again where we believe that we can do this big thing and we want to spend this money on this thing. My favorite thing for business owners, and I just know this because I've been through it so many times, but everybody thinks they need a rebrand. You don't need a new website. You don't need a new logo. You don't need to make it look pretty. That's the equivalent of like buying a fancy car for
right.
business. Like, no, you can't afford the fancy car because you don't have clients. So you
Yeah.
need to make sure you get appointments on the calendar. That's the only thing that matters. Like you don't have a business unless you have a pipeline.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, just for anybody coming up in business, that's the one thing. And especially nowadays, like, oh, I need a website or oh, I need this. And all of these things cost money. But if you're just starting out, you just need people to pay you.
And that's
That's
the
it.
one thing we got to be careful, even at 1 million cup. As much as I really like 1 million cup and chamber, et cetera, a lot of those people there are really just marketing. I mean, they're in
Oh, yeah.
marketing. About half of them are marketers. And now they're really not, I mean, I enjoy them and go, but they're there to sell, you know, a website, whatever it is. You know what I mean? I mean, again, 1 million cup does a better job than most with managing that process. But still, it's important to
Hmm.
remember that's kind of their job. It goes to your point. Tell me a little bit about what's working. First of all, just kind of you work with both businesses and individuals, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So, and I think both are similar. I know people want to kind of break them up, but they still are kind of similar. Like my three questions, you know, is your lifestyle support your income? Well, that's a business question. That's an individual question, right? You
Yeah.
still have to answer yes to both of those, right? Whether you're running
Hmm.
a business or so. Kind of give us a kind of a what are you seeing working in businesses since we kind of focus on that. But you know, if you want to touch on a little bit of the individual stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. So, and are you talking about in my industry in general, or just what do I see working with businesses and
What
sales?
businesses and sales? So are you seeing businesses use your event like to get in front of clients to meet? You know, are they doing
Oh, yes.
client events? Are they doing kind of how are those kinds of events working? Do you do that stuff? Is that kind of one
Yeah,
of your
yeah,
specialties? Okay, that's what I
absolutely.
assumed.
So on the corporate aspect of it, so I like to break up just our verticals in general is wedding, corporate, and social,
Okay,
because those
that
are the
makes sense.
big three. So for our corporate leg, when we're talking about that, corporations, and this is just like anybody, like everybody's focused on something that is most important. So for sales, much like we were just talking about chambers and 1 million cups and all these things, corporate is really focused on how can I either impress my clients and make an impact or impress my employees and make an impact. It's all about the people. So
Right,
what we see most often is we're seeing a lot of like we're about to do an open house for a property management company next month, where they're going to invite all of their partners and their clients and their people that they're associated with, and they're just going to throw this party to showcase their new space, their new office. We see lots of things like that. We did a gala for another, actually for a marketing company. And whenever you're able to make that impact and really have people connect, because that's what we specialize in, is making moments where people connect, whether it be over an activation, a cool, one of the main ones that everybody does is the photo booth. Everybody loves the photo booth. They want to go take pictures and they want to, if it's something that's interesting, there might be, I've recently connected with someone who does like a perfume, create your own scent activation. So you just go there and you smell all of the things and you create something that's unique to you. I see a lot of that right now where people are making unique experiences so people feel a personal connection then to the business.
Oh, that's a great idea. And then that
Mm-hmm.
always that particular event always stands out because they remember we did that or we did this.
Yes, yes. And I think it's really neat, especially when you're able to incorporate those elements, like I said, like the perfume bar or maybe a candle making station or something like that. Then you actually
Right.
have a physical memorabilia that you can bring back. It's not just promo. I feel like I'm so promoed out at this point. Nobody
Right.
wants your chapstick or your uh little palm card or whatever it is. Like we want something that is going to be intentional.
Right.
That's the way the world is going right now, I see.
As a financial advisor, one thing that's really popular in my world is they'll do client appreciation dinners. I don't do them
Hmm.
because my clients are pretty spread out, but I always do think about what's a way to do that and do it in a way because part of that also gets into the what's your business model, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
like if you're a real cost effective, lower price tier, you wouldn't do a client appreciation if
No.
you're a high, so it's kind of interesting. So
Yeah.
um, that's a good
But you can
idea. Good
also
point.
celebrate instead of doing like a big fancy dinner, you could also do like some kind of event at a restaurant, for example, and just have like kind of open, one of those things where you say, hey, come as you are, whether or not you provide something or not, but you provide the platform and the container and the space for people to connect. And it just depends on what angle you are. I know you work a lot
Eh,
with business owners, so
Right.
you could make it like where you rent out a part of a restaurant or you just ask the restaurant like, hey, I would like to have 20 people and we're going to just do this. You set up a little microphone and, have
Yeah.
somebody speak and that's
Have a
it.
prince. Yeah, that's an
Simple,
awesome
you
idea.
know?
So, do you have anything else to add on that? The whole, kind of event thing for businesses. You want to kind of spend a little bit of time on the clients. What are you seeing with clients?
With the clients of
Individuals.
the business.
No,
Oh,
individuals, not the business. Just go to like weddings.
oh
Is that your
yes.
main thing with when you're
Right
talking about
now
individuals, it's weddings?
yes. Oh my gosh. So weddings is the biggest party you'll have in your life pretty much, unless it's a milestone birthday or something like that. But for weddings we spend it's a little bit more personal, you know? Weddings are more emotionally driven. And so there are a lot of factors, unlike the businesses where it's like they have a goal and whatever the goal is, we want to make an impact on the client, we want to make an impact on the employee. For the wedding, it's making an impact on the family.
Yeah,
And so
that's
you
right.
have to understand more of the emotional dynamics and reading the room. It's a little bit more touchy feely, I guess, than a business would be. Businesses are very, these are the numbers, this is what we want. And
Yeah, that's a
generally
good point.
speaking, yeah. So it's just a different, it's completely different. It's the whole logistics are the same if you think about it, but the tone and the way that you have to approach things are very different.
And talking about the touchy feely, just as a little bit off, going down a little rabbit hole, is one of the best weddings I ever went to. It was hilarious because the bride and the groom thought it was a disaster, and what happened was they had the wedding at the church, and then they went from the church to the wherever
The reception.
the reception was, and there was a big kind of hold up in the pictures, and so there was like an hour and a half kind of between an hour maybe between
Yeah.
the leaving the church and the reception. Everyone was at the church or everyone was at the reception, and I was like, that was probably the best wedding I've ever been to. And they're like, what are you talking about? That was like a disaster. I said, no. And what happened was because there was this big gap, the music didn't start. And by the music
Mm,
not starting, that caused the bride to like think this was bad. And I told her, I said, I have to tell you, I never thought, I didn't even realize it. But to be honest with you, it was the best wedding I've ever been to, like literally. And
oh,
and the
yeah.
reason is because the music didn't start, right? So for an hour, we were able to walk, I was able to walk around the reception and see cousins and aunts and uncles that I hadn't seen in years and actually have a conversation where almost every wedding
Interesting.
starts with music right out of the gate and there's no connection. And what's
Really?
so fascinating, Melody, is once I got done, I was telling someone, and no one caught what was happening other than they just knew that it was a really good wedding, right? And but no
Yeah,
one realized that the reason is because there was a mix up in the when the music would start. And the music
really
started an
cool.
hour and a half late. And by it starting an hour and a half late, it actually ended up in the kind of top tier of kids getting, the weddings I've gone to. And it's really fascinating. And to this day,
Yeah.
when I have conversations with people there, they're like, yeah, that was a really good wedding. And then I say, you know why? And they don't know, but it was because there was no music, because we ended up
Wow.
being able to connect. So to your
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but almost no bride would, you would never almost, well, you wouldn't consciously plan a wedding that you would go from the church to the reception area and have no music for an
Yeah.
hour. That just wouldn't happen,
No. No. No, you're
right?
telling me this, but it's kind of like made a light bulb go off in my head. I was like, wow, like I know, and this is just something in our industry. DJs are known to be like, look at me, you know?
Yeah.
So to your point, maybe even this is something I want to actually bring back to my team is like, let's talk about the cocktail hour. Like, is the DJ overbearing? Are they overpowering? Do we need to adjust this while we're doing weddings? Because that's very interesting and it's very true. I
And
can't tell you how many times it's like, I can't hear you. It's too loud.
Melanie, no one caught it. I,
Yeah.
I caught it accidentally. I would have never known if I wouldn't have had a conversation with my nephew after the fact. And he said she was the bride was so upset. And I'm like,
Oh,
what about? And she said, because da 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 da. And I said, that's like crazy, because to me as a person going, because again, when you go to weddings, how many times do you see those cousins? Not very many times. Once every 3, 4,
no,
5 years. Well, if you just go right from the wedding to the reception and then you have just a bunch of loud music, well, you don't have any real conversations. It doesn't
no,
exist. But
no.
it did at that wedding,
That's
because there was
awesome.
an hour of quiet, literally quiet. And remember, most people are older, so they can't hear, right? So
Hmm.
if you even have light music in the background, that's enough to
Yes.
make it where people will just go and sit down and talk to the person next to them.
Yes,
Interesting. So,
absolutely.
but to your point, the kind of takeaway from that little rabbit hole is you have to really think about how do you connect people in any
Hmm.
environment, right? No, whether it's an event or whether it's your office, people want to
Yeah.
be heard and people want to talk and people want to connect, right? I mean, that's
Yes. 100%. That's like my life mission in hospitality is just to make people feel seen, cared for, and appreciated. That's all we all
exactly.
want.
I mean, that's what causes people to leave that event and say, I remember that as a special event.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, so let's shift gears and go to AI. So that's
Hmm.
kind of my favorite subject. So what are you
Oh, me
seeing
too.
with kind of AI in these businesses and kind of in your business? How are you using it? What's kind of your takeaway from
Oh
it?
man, we use AI every single day, and I think that's the most interesting part. I actually just released. We do a monthly journal, and I just released an article that talked about why AI cannot be your wedding planner
That's
because
good.
a lot of people, and what we were just talking about in the beginning of the call was like a lot of people are scared that AI is going to take their jobs. And while AI is going to make a lot of shifts in the industry, it's not going to take the place of real human connection. Like, I don't know about you, but I can spot AI, and this is mostly because I use it so often. I can spot it like this. And it's really at this point when I'm noticing it, because I use it when I'm writing copy. Um, I use it I use it to build programs on my back of house systems. Like I literally learned how to code in Excel because of AI. It's
Right.
like you just need to know how to prompt it. And I think that's the biggest thing when we're talking about this AI scenario is that a lot of people don't know how to effectively use it. And because if you're asking it a generic question, you're going to get a generic answer. And that's why we see all over the place. It's like you just said in the beginning, it's like the people who are real stars and the top of their game, they're going to shine because AI is going to enhance that. But AI also enhances when you give it garbage and enhance that
Incompetence.
garbage.
No, if you don't know
Yeah,
what you're talking about, AI will reveal it.
exactly. It is a tool, and I'm not going to lie, I've argued with an AI more than one time
You and I are
because
almost identical. So I'm also like, I use it a lot. I'm a power user, but I wouldn't call myself an expert at it, right? So again, AI is like a continuum, you know what I mean? So, but I also used it enough to exactly to your point. I can tell when someone's using AI, and I don't mind them using AI, but I can tell when they're using it lazily is maybe the best way to word it, right?
yes,
So
yes,
I expect everyone to use AI. But if you're really good at AI, you shouldn't be able to identify it, right? That's the bar, and that's a pretty high bar. Yeah, right. I mean,
Yes.
so if someone's using I expect everyone to be using it as a small business, but they need to use it at a level that people don't recognize it.
Yeah. I saw something the other day and it was like, we all know ChatGPT and the M dashes. I even taught ChatGPT not to use it and I still have to yell at it to say, hey, you used one.
Right.
It's just, but even now at this point, because it's so integrated into our system, it's like, I don't even think they have an M dash on our modern keyboards. I don't know, my computer's from 2020. But I'm looking at it and it's like I want to use it now in my speech because I'm so used to seeing it. And it really does drive some points home, something that a
Correct.
semicolon or a colon won't do. Um, so it's just becoming part of who we are. But to your point, like when I'm reading it, like you have to almost read in between the lines, like read in between the AI because AI puts these phrases like honestly and things that you wouldn't. I never use the word thrilled. Like that is something that AI loves to do. I'm thrilled to announce. Like I'm not thrilled. I've never used that word in my life. Thrilled is
Right.
not a thing for me. So those little things you need to be mindful and like you can't just copy paste right out the gate. Like you have to talk to it, you have to train it, you have to consistently like this is my voice.
So
And
I used AI, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I went.
no,
So
you're
when I
fine.
was using it, I did my admin and I we do like obviously emails to our clients. So I sent an email
Mm-hmm.
out. So Heather and I put an email together, and we spent a bunch of time kind of tightening it up and getting it right, right. And I have a really good client in South Florida, and the message was very important that I was trying to send. And I said, "Did you read that?" And she said, "No, I didn't read it." And I said, "Why not?" She goes, "I thought it was just one of your mass emails." And I said, "Really?" I said, "What gave it away?" You know what it was? I said, "Dear." I
Oh,
said, "Dear" in the client's name. And she goes, "You never say dear. You always say hi." And I
interesting.
start every single email with hi so and so, and then I get into the conversation. And she goes, "In that email, you had dear so and so." And she goes, "So I just assumed it was not
Wow.
important." So little
Yeah.
words, because clients do get to know us, right? And little words like that, like AI doesn't necessarily know it. So it's important. Like you wouldn't think she literally, Melanie, she didn't even read the email. Like she didn't even read the first
Just said
sentence
dear.
because she saw
Wow.
dear her name.
And how did you went back to her to ask her,
No,
and
I
that's
just
how you
happened to
found
be
that
talking
out?
to her again. It was just luck. Goes back to my wedding example. It was pure luck. I just happened
Yeah.
to be talking to her a day later, and I said, "Well, hey, I sent that email. Did you get a chance to touch bases on that or look at that?" And she goes, "I just deleted it." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "I just assumed it was one of your, mass
This was
emails."
for you, like
No, exactly.
specifically.
But remember, we do to our clients. I do too, and my clients understand it. I do have emails that I send you personally, right? And then I have
Yeah.
emails that I send mass, right?
Hmm.
And people who are busy or whatever they are, they're like, I don't need to read mass. That's your job, Tim. So as
Interesting.
a communicator, like one of the things Heather and I really focused on and focus on now really heavily is when we're sending messaging, how do we, even though it's mass, right? Even though we're using Zapier to kind of go through and create the emails, we always send 5 or 6 tests and then we read through them really tightly so that to my point, though we're using AI and using systems to process it, you can't tell it because it's coming through my email. It's not coming from, whatever, one of those big, you know,
It's interesting because I'm thinking about this in a way because I don't know if you've seen, but a lot of small businesses, they're like in lieu of hiring employees, they're using these AI agents, right? That is not something that I am trusting the AI to do. I trust my team to use AI and then bring me their ideas. But I just don't, I feel like at this point, like we are agents of the AI. Like we are managers of the AI, if you kind of think of it that way. And we have to, exactly what you just said, you're sending these tests and then you're looking. So there still needs to be human oversight. And there are programs now that are literally infiltrating your email clients and they're sending out emails as you, as an AI. And I think that's such a dangerous practice because like I said, as much as it's a tool, it really does degrade the trust. Like that's one thing that I have spent a really long time building in my business is trust. Trust is the epitome, it's the most important thing that you can have, especially in the middle of what we call a trust recession right now. And why would you then hand over the keys to something as important as your business or as important as your life, because AI is in our life too, and let them have free reign? It mind blows me.
I agree. And
Yeah.
but people don't realize now. Again, I don't know that I would catch. First of all, I'm pretty careful. I'm pretty self-aware, right? I mean, so when I'm talking to clients, et cetera, so it's just been kind of my whole life kind of background of kind of, well, what caused you to do that? What caused you to do this? Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
stuff's psychological. And so like we caught that early on. Would another business ever catch that? Right. I mean,
No.
if you weren't that tight or I didn't happen to call that client, and so now even like in my phrasing and things like that, you have to go through it word for word and make sure that it matches your tone, your voice, your kind of
Mm-hmm.
process. Because if you don't, to your point, if you just want to use an agent, I mean, Zapieri's kind of an agent, right? But it's a low
Yeah.
level agent, right? It's
Yeah.
you still are going to create it'll send the emails out, but then you got to have someone who's techie enough to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, like I'm not that techie on Zappery, though I could
Yeah.
learn it. I don't want to say I can't do it, but Heather's really good with it, right?
Yeah.
So she can send out 200 emails that
Yeah.
look like they were personal and customized, to that client, right?
Yes.
But that's a skill set that she has that takes time. That's not an AI skill set. That's a her skill set.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And you have that oversight. So even though you don't have necessarily the skill to, like you said, you're not very techy, at least she can utilize the technology, then you can oversee that. Like
Exactly.
that's the real thing is I feel like, and this, you see this a lot, especially in big companies. And I'm gonna bring it more to the human aspect here of when you have a big corporation, they always say that like the closer to the fishbowl that you are, the better the quality. And it's the same way even in our small businesses. Like that's what I was talking about, like outsourcing to AI. Like while it's a great tool, it gets you farther and farther away from who you are. And the businesses are always reflection of their leadership. So it's important to make sure that you're going down those rabbit holes, so to speak, and looking at the very little nitty gritty, looking at the details. Because I think that sometimes, and this is definitely a entrepreneurship challenge, is when we're looking at the future and we're so focused on the vision, we forget about what's right in front of us.
Yeah, I agree. And so here's my little pitch of my business or book, but it goes to AI. So about 5 years ago, I decided I needed to write a book, but not for regular clients, not for anyone outside my client base. Okay, because what happens to me, I realize is my clients and I, we only spend call it 2 hours a year. I mean,
Mm.
maybe three, but not very much time, right? You go in and have a meeting. I mean, very few people spend more than 3 to 4 hours with their financial advisors on a yearly
Mm-hmm.
basis. The vast majority is that hour and a half. Same thing's true with your tax people. Same thing's true with your attorneys. Same thing's true with all these professions, right? You don't spend very much time. And so in each one of those times, obviously these are meetings for them. So I focus on, well, what do they want to talk about and what's their concerns or what's their, okay. So then the meeting ends up being most of it's on something they do. And then I'll touch on some of my points. And so I decided, I said, I need to write something where I kind of help people kind of get my observations and views of how people grow wealth and maintain wealth because I've spent my whole life helping rich people stay rich. Okay, that's really my job, right? I mean, and I've not done the Dave Ramsey where I help people that don't have money get money, right? That's not my specialty. My specialty is meet rich people. How do we stay rich, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so because of that, I've spent lots and lots of time with people who are very successful financially. Now, again, financial is
Mm-hmm.
just one part of being successful. So I'm not saying that there's, not everything, but it is a core part. And
Yeah.
so my book, I went through and I said, well, let me find 3 or 4 things that are kind of common across wealthy people. And to be honest with you, I found 3 that were pretty common. Okay. But they weren't always kind of aligned with every single person that I knew was wealthy. But I just kept at it for, about a year messing around with kind of, well, what are those 3? And I'd write them down and then I'd take one off. And then I saw Charlie Munger do a Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting, and someone asked him, "What was the best lesson that you ever learned?" And Munger, with no pause, okay, I mean literally just immediate, so you could tell it was something that he had already knew. He says, "Invert everything." That was his answer, right?
Mm.
So take everything and invert it. And he tells the story about how when he was in the army, he was in charge of the weather for the pilots, and he says, "I realized real early that." Telling the pilots that it was blue skies, low winds, 10-mile visibility didn't help them much. Where I added value was you have thunderstorms, high winds, low clouds, zero visibility. Those are the kinds of things that it helped. And so he says, I took that invert kind of everything. So what's best case, what's worst case? And he goes, I took that into my financial career, which he started in marketing and then he took it to Berkshire Hathaway. So whenever he
Mhm.
looked at anything, he looked at, okay, what's best case, which is we all look at, obviously, running a small business, or an investment. I mean, why would
Mhm.
we think about it as not working? We wouldn't do it if we didn't think it was not going to work. But
Yeah.
but we have to look at the other side of the equation always, right? So that goes back to that invert everything. So the reason this long kind of short story, I'll shorten it up, but is the reason I say this is the minute I saw that, I started thinking, okay, what are things people who aren't wealthy do?
Hmm.
And it was literally 2 days, three things aligned. The people who are rich, they all did this. The people who have no money, they all didn't do this. And they were this: have a plan. People who have money all have a plan. And I'm not talking about a 50-page document. I'm talking about they know where they are, they know where they're going. Kind of starts the conversation.
Hmm.
Second thing is rich people all have they're all diversified. And I don't mean just diversified in investments, they're diversified in income, they're diversified in tax accounts, but diversification is kind of a core principles of theirs. And then the third is they seek counsel, and the third one's the hardest one, right? Because the first two are really objective, right? If you sat down with 10 financial advisors, they're going to be the same, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like you're a financial advisor. If you sat down with me and said, let's have a plan, sat down with me, we're not going to say that much different, right? The only thing we
Yeah.
will say different would be order, right? So,
Hmm.
so because of your personal experience and my personal experience, I might put stuff in a
Exactly.
different order, right? But other than that, they're the same. The seek counsel is the hardest. And this gets to the AI piece, right? So what happens with the
Hmm.
seek counsel is people who are really, really successful, they're what I would call almost curious. And they ask
Yes.
questions like you almost don't even realize they're seeking counsel because they ask it in such a curious way, right? Like, why'd you do that? What's this happening? Da, 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 da. They're very, very good at it. People who do not accumulate wealth, terrible at it. They're terrible. Like, absolutely. It's so unnatural. I think it's like questioning their thoughts. And what I'm finding with AI, so this finishes it up, is with AI is people who are really curious, they'll go and ask AI a question, then they'll ask another question, they'll ask another question, they'll ask another question. Kind of go way down rabbit holes with one little point, right? And the person who is not that curious will still use AI. So if you and I were together, but I ask 5 follow-up questions and this other person asks 2, you end up with different answers.
Yes.
That's a long, I mean, I know that was a long story, but I can't, I mean, I've sat down with hundreds and hundreds of wealthy people, and I can tell you that seek counsel is literally the hardest of all three. And I don't see how you train or teach people to do it.
Gary V had a video that he said when he uses AI, and I can relate to this so much because I do this. He uses the voice note function of it, and he says some of my prompts are 40 minutes long because he's going down and he's giving it so much information that it can really dig and give a personalized answer versus that generic, like you said, you only ask one question in Google, what makes the sky blue? Okay, it'll give you some answer, but
Exactly.
a scientist will actually go in and, well, what is this? I don't know what that is. What is this? And you get a more complete answer that way and get down to really the question. Because sometimes there's also that book, Ask Five Whys. I don't know. I don't remember off the
I've
top of
read
my
it. Yeah.
head. Yes.
I know
So,
exactly
like,
what you're
you can
talking about.
ask why, but is that the real reason?
Right.
Keep asking why.
And it
And
almost
I
never
love,
is, right? Based on the first
no,
why is almost never the reason.
yeah, never. And it's interesting that you said seek counsel because I believe that you can ask questions, not only just to the AI, but like the people around you. And because we all have, like you said, we all have our own experiences, you can ask questions to the most random people who you might not have thought, like ask the homeless man a question. I know that sounds wild, but he's going to give you an answer and it might give you a tip to why he is where he is at. And ask somebody who is, middle management, ask them a question. They're going to have a completely different answer than when you ask a wealthy person a question. Like everybody's going to come from their own experience. And from that, you can get your own answer.
What I find with people who are really financially successful, kind of going the thing, is I'll do the Charlie Munger kind of contrast, invert versus the other thing. What they'll do is they'll go and say, what do you think about this, right? And the person who's really successful, they're fine asking the question, and they have zero emotion attached to doing anything with it, right? Like I mean, literally zero, almost
Yes.
negative zero, right? Where a person who's not very good at asking for, and again, I came to see counsel, but I got feedback all the time. Could be input, could be whatever the word you want to use, but the concept's the
Yeah.
same. Is the person who really struggles with that, they think if they ask the question, there's some obligation to do something with it, right? And so what'll happen is that adds stress and anxiety to them. So they're just like, I'm not asking, right? The person
Yeah.
who's really successful will say, I'll ask 10 people, do nothing with it. But then when you ask them, kind of, where'd you get that idea? They can't really tell you. Not because they don't want to, okay? They have no problem giving someone credit for an idea that they had. They just literally don't know where they got it because they asked so many people. And then to your point, it turned into something different than 10 people asking a question, right? So they ended up going down some path and it wasn't really Melody's idea. It was Melody and Susan's and Joe's and John's
Hmm.
and the combination of I did this.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that's how we form our beliefs. Our beliefs are formed based on our experience, and you're increasing your experience by asking other people. It's
Exactly.
like it's like the you're gonna laugh. The thought that I had about this is like a vampire or a succubus. Like they literally like take your life from you. But that's kind of what you're doing when you're asking people like that phrase, let me pick your brain.
That is what
Like you said,
the
you're picking their brain and it's free knowledge and it's free information. It's literally information. What you do with it is your prerogative. But you're when you ask a question to someone, you're getting that information and you're bringing it in and you are now it's your experience too. Very interesting.
It's so fascinating. And what I use AI for, so someone who's a power user of AI, is I use it as a way to frame questions with people, right? So I actually
Hmm.
connect the two. So all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I want to see if this is working. And then I need to say, okay, well, then I need to ask three or four people, what do you think of that, right? Or what's about that?
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I just so much enjoy 1 million cup.
Hmm.
I'm rolling out like a new tool where I wanted feedback and I prepped and did the in front of the mirror presentation. I spent so much time doing this little 5 minute speech, and I did a 5 minute speech at 1 million cup on this project that I've spent a year doing. It's kind of it's connecting AI with clients. I haven't rolled it
Yeah.
out yet, but I'm working on it. And when I got done, someone in the back said, I'm still not sure what you're doing. And I said, I missed it, didn't I? And she says, yep. And I said, I spent time on the why when I should have come out with the what. And she says, that's exactly
Interesting.
right. And I'd spent the whole 5 minutes on, well, why would clients use something because AI gives bad answers, because AI gives sycophant answers, or, you know what I mean? So I had a whole kind of thing, but I missed who are you talking to? And then what's, like the whys might have
Oh wow,
been
yeah.
it might have been a really good presentation to a different group,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
to that group, I should have never even talked about the why. I should have just talked about the what. And so it's interesting.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
and I actually changed as I've kind of continued to roll it out. I've actually slowed down and said, okay, well, should I talk to you about the why or what? And they'll say just the what. I don't care why.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's so cool. That's information for you. Now you're like,
Correct.
okay, like now I can, and that's the beauty of that 1 million cups group is
It
that
is
you're really able to get that feedback on something that like,
instant.
yeah, it went over her head pretty much. Like it just
Yes.
we
No.
get so hyper focused on stuff. And this is why it's so important to let's bring it back to that seek counsel part is when you're so down the rabbit hole you're speaking gibberish to somebody. Oh my gosh, I was having a conversation with someone and we talked about how people, they're just speaking different languages. You cannot talk to someone who doesn't know how to drive a car about how that works. They've never driven a car in their life. Like you
Yes.
can't have that conversation with them. The same with somebody who's a pilot. Like I don't know how to drive a plane. If you talk to me about, oh, this switch and this, that, I don't know, you know? So you have to find a common ground on how you can speak. We're having this conversation because I love AI. I use it every day. But if
Correct. Me too.
we would have to shift it if I was somebody who, what is that? You know? So it's just about really knowing your audience and connecting with them on that level. And it starts with asking questions.
Yeah, it really does. It does.
Mm-hmm.
So as we finish, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation. It was fun. And like this
Yes.
is a typical conversation where I just don't really come with a bunch of questions. I don't want it to be, listen, organized. I just kind of let it free format, kind of wherever we go, we go.
Really
Give
cool.
us how people get a hold of you and, kind of just a quick kind of commercial, kind of what do you do and
Yeah.
how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So, anytime that you need help organizing your thoughts, we have three main ways that we help people. Is one, if you are a busy individual and you want to have a party and you don't know where to start and you need somebody to do it for you, we're those people. I Additionally, if you just need a little bit of counsel, a little bit of help, and you want somebody to be there, we have a done with you model, and then we have a completely just come in and execute. You've done all the planning and you need help executing on the day because you want to enjoy it. We do that as well. As far as getting a hold of us, the website's the best place, Allegro, Allegro.events. And that'll give you all of the information you need as far as how to get in contact with us and plan your event.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks, Melody. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you coming on. And if you guys have any events coming, reach out and touch bases with her.
Absolutely.
Thank you.